G'day humans, Chris Stead here. Today I'm reviewing the LG Ultragear 45-inch OLED curved monitor. This huge beast behind me. Let's go. So look at this beauty, and I realise you're seeing my face twice now, but that's because, well, this is one of my videos and I know that I can't get pinged for copyright for showing it in the background. But I did want to kind of have something up there flying on the monitor as we talk about it. Now, I was pretty excited when LG asked if I'd like to do a review of this 45-inch monitor because, look, I jumped on the curved bandwagon a few years ago. I was traditionally using the flat monitors, and then at one point I got the flat 34-inch and the curved 34-inch, I think both from LG at the same time to review. So I was able to compare them both like back to back, side by side. And I just loved, first I loved the widescreen. I love the extra screen real estate because it allows you to multitask. It's kind of like a dual monitor setup, but much more functional. And the fact that this is actually considered a gaming monitor, but I wanted something that would also work well for my work. So I could multitask, then I could game, then I could watch stuff as well, right? So that flat screen versus the curved, I just found the curved to be so much more functional because everything is looking towards you and it's facing you. So I was really excited by the idea of testing this out because on paper, it had better specs. It looked like a superior machine. I was a little bit worried whether it was going to fit on my desk because it's just so big. But you know, after a little bit of getting used to having such a large amount of screen right in front of me, I've, spoiler alert, kind of fallen in love with it. So anyway, let's jump in and take a closer look at the ins and outs, the pros and cons of the LG Ultragear 45-inch OLED curved monitor. A bit of a mouthful, but that's what it is. Let's start with the price. Now, so the recommended retail price originally on these bad boys was $2,999, so quite the expense when you think you can get a fair bit of actual TV for that amount of money. But just before I jumped on to film this, I had a look around. It's early 2025 at the moment, and I saw these going for as low as $1,799. So I think at $2,999, the original recommended retail price, it was probably just a bit too expensive. But at $1,799, that's doing all right. And when we compare that price to comparable models from the likes of Samsung and Dell, it actually comes in a bit under at that sale price if you can get it. And I saw that in quite a few places. So I do think that you probably will be able to find it for that price. So keep that in mind as we run through the specs. So that display, as mentioned, is 45-inch Ultra-WQHD 1440p, so 3440 by 1440 curved OLED. It's actually 44.5 inches, not exactly 45, but pretty close. So that's an aspect ratio of 21:9, and it's got anti-glare and low reflection tech on the panel. Now the refresh rate is a super solid 240 Hertz, and that's a variable refresh rate as well. So that's going to adjust for you while you're gaming. And like I said, this is built as a gaming monitor, and obviously useful for many other purposes. But you know, VRR, pretty essential to gaming in my opinion. Now the response time, excellent, 0.03 milliseconds. Contrast ratio is 1.5 million to 1 as well, so that's fantastic. Brightness, look, 200 nits typical, and it can peak up to 1300 nits in HDR. And this, as I'll go into more when we talk about performance, is a bit of a weak point for me, is the brightness. Like I mentioned, and that ties into the HDR, so it's HDR 400, which is definitely, it's entry level, basically. You got HDR 600, I think, and then you got HDR 1000, you know, which is like when you're getting up to the far end. So I'm pretty sure, I think it's an HDR 800, but I might be mistaken there. So yeah, brightness it's potentially its only weak point. Color gamut, DCI-P3 98.5%, so you know, not perfect, but pretty close. It's got adaptive sync with, you know, it's got NVIDIA G-Sync and AMD FreeSync support. It's got, well, with the actual design, you can tilt, you can adjust the height, and you can swivel the monitor. The curvature on it is 800R, so that's basically referring to the radius in millimeters, so the curvature radius, so 800R is quite curved. Audio-wise, there are two 7-watt speakers inbuilt. There's also a 4-pole DTS headphone X port as well. Elsewhere on the ports, you've got two HDMI 2.1 ports, which is good. You've got a USB-C 3.1 port, and you've got two USB-A 3 ports and no Thunderbolt. So it's a little bit dated in my opinion when it comes to the ports. It could be a little bit better there. Weight-wise, 10.9 kilograms, that's with the base installed, so that's a fair bit of weight with the base installed, but I think it drops about 2 kilos if you take the base off and wall mount it, because it is VESA certified. And lengthwise, this thing's almost a meter long at 992.7 millimeters. Now, in terms of the design, look, I would describe the LG Ultragear 45 as workmanlike. I don't think it's particularly sexy. I don't think it's a particularly mind-blowing design. It's gonna change the way that you look at your office or your lounge room or wherever it ends up. But there's nothing particularly wrong with it. You probably pick up that it's got a pretty thick bezel, OLED panel, yet quite a thick bezel all the way around. So that's something that you do notice it. So that's something where potentially isn't optimal. I'm not a great fan of the base, which has got this boomerang shape like so, and it actually kind of sticks a fair way out into your workspace. And that becomes a bit of a pain in the butt when you're trying to work on a reasonably small desk space and try to fit in your keyboard or a mat or bits and pieces that end up gathering around that. It's just a shame that they couldn't just make that a little bit more flatter against the wall, a little bit more rectangular, let's say, than rather jutting out. I mean, it kind of looks cool, but it's not functionally that great. The button down here, which will bring up your little monitor, is really easy to access. It's really easy to get through here. As you can see, it's quite obvious and bright and accessible. And there's this little side or little bottom hump you can see down the bottom here is your speakers, as well as that button. So that kind of design now I quite like. I think that they've worked that in pretty well. I don't really notice that kind of dent down at all, and it fits it. It makes it really easy to access and use. Less accessible are the ports. They're right in the middle of the back. It's a big screen, so getting behind that is going to be difficult for people in many situations, I feel. So that's a bit of a shame. They couldn't move the port somewhere a little bit more accessible. It is VESA compliant, as I said, so you can wall mount this thing, so that is something you can look into as well. But I've obviously got it see on the stand here. I don't know how wall mounting would go really. Like, you wouldn't wall mount it in your lounge room, for example, with the curve aspect, because you really need to be sitting in a sweet spot to get the benefits of the curve. But anyway, you can do it if you want to. But one thing it does also come with is a remote. Now, unfortunately, the remote wasn't in the box. This is not massively uncommon with review units, so it's gone through a few journalists, it's landed with me, so somewhere along the line someone hasn't put the remote back in, so I can't show you that. That now normally wouldn't be the biggest issue, other than the fact that some of the settings are only accessible through the remote, and because I don't have the remote, I can't go in and muck around with those settings too much. But that's just, I think, a general shame, because remotes get lost, they're not always on hand. You should be able to just access everything. So that's a bit of a bummer, but the remote itself, from what I could see, looks pretty slim, simple, straightforward, basic, stock standard kind of modern remote. So not too much to complain about there. Now let's talk about performance, and this is where it's really easy to talk positively about the Ultragear 45 from LG, because of both of the kinds of experiences that I've used with this, it's done really well. So from a work multitasking perspective, obviously the screen real estate's really good. The contrast ratio, that sharpness is really good. And I'll give you an example. I was using a probably 2 or 3 year old, probably a bit longer now actually, about 4-year-old LG curved monitor prior to putting this in for the case of the review. And one of my side hustles is that I make kids books. So I make kids books for people all around the world. And I recently finished a book for a lady, and she got the proofs back, because you always get proofs of prints to check to make sure what you can see on the paper that you can't see on a screen. And she was saying there's these marks around a couple of the images, all hand-drawn art, you know, she's listing the marks. And I'm looking on my old screen, and I said, I can't see anything, there's nothing there. Anyway, I switched to this monitor, and instantly I could see it. So straight away, despite technically being the same resolution, just the panel tech had improved so much over a couple of years that I could see it straight away. I was like, oh wow, yeah, there's marks everywhere. So that was a real world example, I thought, of just how impressive that kind of clarity is on a monitor, even with this kind of screen real estate that's going on. Then obviously it's a gaming monitor, and when you look at that contrast ratio, when you look at that response time and refresh rate, That kind of stuff just makes it purr when you're playing games. It's just so smooth. It's really, really enjoyable. It's nice. At 800R curvature, it really immerses you. It really feels like you're surrounded by the gaming experience. You can see here, this obviously shot in 16:9. It's not that 29 by aspect ratio, so you've got those kind of side black pillars. But you know, the games that I've been playing take up full screen, look absolutely mint. So that's definitely a positive. The audio experience isn't so great. 7 watts, 2 speakers. You shouldn't expect too much. Honestly, I think any gamer you know, worth their salt is going to be using a headset anyway. I don't think that's a major negative. It produces sound. It's there if you need it. But yeah, it doesn't blow you away. Where the thing really lets you down is the brightness. So as I mentioned, it's just that day-to-day, moment-to-moment when you're just doing stuff. You're looking at 200 nits. It says 275 on the website, and it also says 200. Like it's low anyway. So nits of brightness, and I noticed that. I was like, geez, I'd really like to make my screen brighter right now, and I can't. I'm at max settings already. Now, obviously, when you're in HDR, the peak brightness can get up there. It can pop a lot more in that kind of video game experience where that HDR is really coming to life, or a movie. I was watching some IMAX enhanced stuff earlier on, that kind of stuff. It's a bit better, but yeah, I think it's got so much else is going on that's really good here. It's just a shame that they just didn't push that HDR up higher and push that kind of minimum brightness, that typical brightness, up a bit more, so that users just had a little bit more flexibility there. So, you know, in a world of great experiences, that's the one where I feel like there could have been some movement. Look, at the end of the day, the LG Ultragear 45-inch OLED curved monitor, and it's an original recommended retail price of $2,999. It's going to be a bit of a challenging argument, I think. I think it's going to deliver, but geez, you're reaching into your pocket. But at the prices we're seeing at the moment, I think it's much easier to recommend. As a gaming experience, look, it's top notch. Those specs, they make a difference, and that curvature really does immerse you in the experiences. But even as a multitasking tool, I've really, really loved it. Like I said, in real world examples of the work that I do in video editing, in design work, even just like browsing, like my eyes aren't great anymore, just being able to read and browse the internet, emails, that kind of thing. It's definitely been a step up from monitors I was using a couple of years old. I've really noticed the difference, despite the fact that the resolution's been the same. So the panel tech is significantly used more better for multitasking and work, as well as allowing it to pop and really deliver in those video games and multimedia experiences. So I think if you're the type of person who is, let's say, gaming 60% and working 40%, and or further down that kind of lean, then I think you're totally in the market for this monitor. I think it's going to deliver a really good result for you. And boy, does that size like really does make a difference. It feels like I'm working on 4 monitors at once. I love that. Yeah. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the LG Ultragear 45 OLED curved monitor. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that's helped you decide whether or not it's right for you. Make sure you check out my other videos, including, if you would like to, I've got heaps of stuff in the Maldives, fantastic part of the world, but also plenty more to do with technology and gaming as well. All right, thank you very much for watching. I'm Chris Stead. Until next time, I'll check you later. Woo!